Did you know that I can see how important you are from where you are sitting? That is the king's table. And the king, he sits in the middle. And on one side of the king, he would have his law speaker. A law speaker was a book. The Vikings didn't have paper, so they couldn't write law books. So a law speaker had to memorize all of the laws and then recite them at the opportune moment. On the other side of the king, he would either have his jarl or his hirdman. And the hirdman is the boss of the king's personal soldiers. Now, on the top half of that table, the upper half, the king's family would sit. On the upper half of that table, the king's hird. And hird is the king's personal soldiers. And hird is also a word that has evolved and survives into English today. It's herd, like a flock. On the bottom halves, the lower halves of those two tables, the rich and the powerful would sit. The blacksmith, the merchant, landowners, and so on and so forth. And the further away from the king's table you sat, the lower and lower status in society you had. And at the ends of these two tables, the poor would sit. Still free people.
It's surreal.
But it isn't just ting we have inside here. We also have something that is a lot more fun, which we had actually last night, which is a feast. And the feast is a big party with lots of food and drink and singing and music.
Wow.
Thank you. And there would, of course, be dancing. I'm not going to dance for you. There would be competitions. Sometimes there would be a little bit of fighting. I'm not going to fight you either. But perhaps the most important source of Viking Age entertainment would, of course, be storytelling. And I am going to tell you a story. Please come in, sit down, and listen to my tall tale. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Now we have a king. Now, you're so lucky that you're arriving today because I've decided to tell you my very favorite story. And this is a story about Thor, the god of thunder. Now, he was a very big, powerfully built man. And he flew across the heavens in a big cart drawn by these two monstrous goats. The wagon wheels, they were so big and rumbled and made so much noise that us humans thought it was thunder. And then, of course, he has his hammer, Mjolnir, a weapon so powerful that with a single blow, it could flatten mountains. When he threw it away, it always returned to his hand. And then, of course, it could shoot lightning. Now, Thor, he loved humans. He was actually known as the defender and champion of humankind. So he visited them often. But he always saw humans on their best behavior. We could hear the thunder coming, and we were like, oh my God, Thor is on his way! We need to clean this place up, put out the good beer, and for God's sakes, people, wash yourselves. Thor is on his way! Now Thor, he got a little tired of that. He felt that he didn't see humans as their true selves. So one day he decided to leave the cart at home. His hammer he put in a sack, closed it, and hung it behind himself on his belt. And then he changed his shape to that of a young, thin boy. And he started to walk. He started in Åskål, where the gods live. And he walked right out of it and entered into a realm known as Midgård, where us humans live. And he walked far and he walked wide. He visited many people and he slept under bushes and under trees and woke up wet and cold. Sometimes, if he was really, really lucky, he found a cave he could sleep in. Well, first, of course, he had to throw out the bear. Now, eventually, Thor entered into a realm that we know as Jotunheimen, the home of trolls and giants. And when Thor came to the coast, he was wet, he was cold, he was hungry, and he was tired of sleeping outside. And Thor, he knew of a farm very close by where a giant lived, a giant by the name of Hyme. And Thor, he knew that Hyme, he was big, he was strong, and he was really, really stupid. So Thor, he went and knocked on the giant's door. Hyme opened up, but couldn't really see anyone until Thor said, "Giant, down here!" Hyme was so surprised. Never, ever in the history of giants has a human been brave enough to come knocking on the giant's door. Hyme didn't recognize him. He just thought he was an ordinary human boy. Usually, when Hyme sees a human, he does like this. But he decided to listen to this young boy, and Thor, he said, "Oh, great, powerful giant, I walked far and I walked wide. I'm wet and I'm cold and I'm hungry. Please, invite me in, give me a place by your fire, and maybe something to eat, and I will be in your debt." So Hyme invited him in, gave him a place by the fire, and started to feed Thor. Now remember, this is still Thor we're talking about. And even if he looks like a young thin boy, Thor can eat a lot of food. Hyme, he put out all of his vegetables, and Thor, he ate them up. Listen, kids, even gods eat their vegetables. Hyme, he put out all of his fish, and Thor, he ate it up. Hyme put out all of his meat, and Thor, he ate it up. And then he drank 3 barrels of beer. Finally, he pushed the plate away from himself, lay down next to the fire, and Hyme spoke. "Young boy, you have eaten all of my food, all of my vegetables, all my fish, all of my meat. I have nothing left. So tomorrow, I will have to go fishing." "Oh, what a great idea," said Thor. "I love fishing trips. I will join you." "Yeah, you may join me, but I don't want any complaining that it's wet or it's cold or you want to go back to land again." "Oh, no, giant. I'm not going to be the first one that wants to go home. Trust me." So they went to bed. And then they rose up very early the next morning and started to prepare the boat. And while they were working on the boat, he said, young boy, I only have bait for myself. So if you want any bait, you will have to go out and get some." Not a problem, thought Thor. So he went looking around Hyme's farm. And eventually he found Hyme's big herd of cows. And Thor went down to the biggest, strongest, baddest bull he could see, looked him straight in the eyes, which is really, really impressive, because cows look that way. He planted his feet, he grabbed a hold of the horns, and he twisted his head clean off the bull, dead to the ground. He took the bull's head, put it in a sack, closed it, and went down to Hyme. They got him to the boat, and Hyme, he thought it would be really funny to get the young thin boy rowing the giant's boat, because Hyme is a giant. So of course he has a giant boat. But Thor, he is so strong that when he rowed the giant's boat, he rowed so hard and so fast that the boat actually skipped across the waters. After an hour or so, Hyme spoke. Young boy, this is my fishing place. Here we'll catch big fat fish. Oh no, giant, we're going further out to sea, where the biggest, fattest fish of them all are. So Thor, he kept on rowing and the boat kept on skipping. After another hour or so, they could hear the sound of a waterfall. Waterfall, you think? There are no waterfalls in the middle of the ocean. They did have that back then. The world had an end back then. The earth ended. So what they heard was the sound of the water falling off the edge of the world. Hyme, he started to get a little nervous. He didn't want to go to the edge of the world. He didn't want to fall off. He had heard that it was so very, very painful. But Thor, he didn't care. He just kept on rowing and the boat kept on jumping. After another hour or so, they could see the edge of the world, where the earth ends and everything falls off. Here, giant, this is our fishing place. Here we'll catch the biggest, fattest fish of them all. So Hyme pulled out his fishing rod. Now remember, Hyme is a giant. So of course he has a giant fishing rod with a hook as big as my arm. And with a hook that big, he can't really fish salmon or cod, not to mention mackerel or herring. The hook is too big, the fish is too small. So Hyme, he fished whales. Now Thor, he didn't have a fishing rod, he didn't have a fishing line. He had his bull's head. So he looked around Hyme's boat to see if there was anything, something he could use. And eventually, he found the anchor. He picked up the anchor, which has this long, big, thick rope on it, took out the bull's head, speared it on the anchor, fastened the rope around one of his hands, and then he threw the anchor and headed out to sea. All around the world lies a beast so fearsome. A serpent by the name of Jormungandr. You might know him as the Midgard serpent. And the Midgard serpent, he is so long that he circles around the world and can bite its own tail. And as soon as the head hit the waters, it could smell the blood. And quick as lightning, it swallowed the head and anchor whole. And Thor, he was so surprised by the speed of this beast that his hands that were holding onto the rope slammed against the railing of the boat. And Thor, he became angry. He yanked the rope so the anchor fastened in the jaw of the great serpent. And the great serpent started to fight back. It fought so hard that all over the world you could feel the ground shaking. And in the oceans, there were waves as big as mountains. Hyme was terrified. He didn't know what this crazy young boy was doing. Fishing the Midgard serpent. He cried and he cried and he cried. Thor, on the other hand, he started pulling on the rope with all of his strength and power. And he used so much of his strength and power that his feet actually punctured holes in the boat. But thankfully, Thor is a god. So he only made his legs longer. He made them so long that he stood on the ocean bottom, still above waters, with the boat on him, around, kind of like underwear. And he kept on pulling on that rope. And deep beneath the waves, you could see these two big red glowing eyes coming closer and closer to the surface. The Midgard serpent was on his way. Suddenly he broke up above the waves and looked down upon the boat. And in the middle he could see a young thin boy holding on to the giant's rope. And in one end of the boat, a crying giant. Father Midgard serpent was right there. And Yumi was so afraid that he screamed and he screamed and he screamed and then he peed his pants. Now remember, Yumi is a giant. Imagine how much a giant can pee. Thankfully, Thor had just made 2 new holes in the boat so everything ran out. Because that's how it worked, don't question it. Thor, he kept on pulling on that rope, and eventually he got the Midgard serpent's head on the railing of the boat. He fastened the rope around one of his hands, and he started to fumble behind himself. Thor wanted to get his hammer. Thor wanted Mjolnir. Thor wanted to slay the Midgard serpent. He cried so much that the Midgard serpent's head was right there, as big as a house, with teeth as long as my arm and as sharp as steel. And he cried and he cried and he cried and he didn't know what to do, so he pulled out his knife and he cut the rope. The Midgard serpent got away. It vanished beneath the waves again. Now Thor, he was angry before, but now he became furious. He turned around to Hyma, looked him into the eyes, and for the first time in Hyma's miserable life, he could see death staring back at him through Thor's eyes. Thor punched him so hard that the giant flew all the way into land again. And when he landed, boom! It was such great force that he created a whole new valley. It's called Hymasdal, and it's in Norway. Thor was now alone in the ocean with a boat on, his underwear boat. But he tore that off of himself and he started to walk back to shore. Now, even though he still had his very, very long legs, it was a very, very long walk. So even with his very, very long legs, it took a very, very long time. So he managed to calm down before he came to shore. And right before he took his very first step onto land, he had one final thought. This is the greatest fishing story ever told. And that is the story of Thor's fishing trip.
Thank you.